Quick question. If you had the same cheat ability as the protagonist, do you think you could replicate their achievements, or are they just built different? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Anyway, on to the video.
Our story begins in Oryu, Incheon, the city of milk, honey, and of course, South Korean porcelain bitches. The otherwise tranquil nightlife is suddenly interrupted by a shrill scream begging for help. A baby had been abducted, and the mother was desperately pleading for anyone willing to step in. Normally, this would be the kind of situation where the masses rallied like crazy, dogpiling the perpetrator. But unfortunately, things were different this time. The villain was a monster, and no one wanted any part of that smoke. Not to mention, the few police officers who tried stepping up had all been clapped and folded like laundry, their corpses still sprawled on the ground. As such, the situation devolved into its current dire state, a monster holding a child hostage while the onlookers were too chicken to do anything about it. Realizing no one was going to step up and stop it, this big-belly, pyramid-head, always-skipping leg day bastard decided to end things and check out early. It drew its hand back, then stabbed for the baby's head with its sharp, dagger-like claws. Blood sputtered in the wake of the attack. But contrary to the gruesome expectation of a mangled baby, the audience was shocked to see the monster missing an arm. Someone had blitzed past it, yeeting its arm clean off and saving the baby in the process. When everyone came to their senses, all they saw was a bleeding stump, a flying arm, and a mysterious man aura farming the shit out of the moment. Blood still dripped from his hand, confirming he was the one responsible for the monster's sudden amputation. With a face that screamed, "Try that shit again if you dare," he glared at the monster with indifference, waiting for its next move. The monster said bet, locking in as its shade quickly turned crimson. It lunged at the mysterious man, rage completely blinding its actions. As for the baby, it said fuck this, and yeeted the child into the air like rotten trash. The mother had no choice but to act fast, lunging forward to catch her chubby bundle of joy. Luckily, the baby was plus size for real, so the extra fat cushioned the fall. Back to the monster and the mysterious man. The former rushed in with a claw attack, demolishing the ground on impact. But as fast as it was, the mysterious man was faster, effortlessly dodging the blow. Advancing after the retreat, he unleashed a furious kick, clocking the monster in the jaw and sending it flying like a headless chicken straight into a nearby wall. Of course, that kind of damage wasn't enough to stop this pot-bellied, pyramid-headed bastard. It quickly shrugged it off and shot toward the mysterious man with renewed vigor, mouth wide open to swallow him whole. To this, the mysterious man said bitch please and high-kicked the absolute shit out of its jaw, sending it airborne. Pressing the attack, he cocked his arm back and unleashed a barrage of muda 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 muda, absolutely demolishing the monster. When that still wasn't enough, he channeled his inner Luffy, blitzing it with an additional dose of Gear 2 Gatling gun. Eventually, under his relentless assault, the monster checked out, collapsing to the ground and breathing its last. Throughout the entire process, the mysterious man maintained the same indifferent expression, as if this were just another Tuesday. The crowd, however, was losing their shit, mouths hanging wide open as they struggled to process what the hell they'd just witnessed. It wasn't until one person started clapping that the rest snapped out of their trance, erupting into applause and cheers for the hero who saved the day. Shouts of gratitude and appreciation rang out, with some even offering cheeks as compensation. Of course, the mysterious man wasn't a simp, so he ignored the suspicious dude and turned to leave. As he did, the mother finally gathered enough courage to call out, thanking him sincerely and asking how she could repay him. Saving a child was no small favor, one she felt compelled to repay no matter what. The mysterious man simply looked at her, refusing to answer. If it were me, I'd have sent her after that sussy dude who offered cheeks as payment, because really, what in the ditty was that? But the mysterious man was a far better person than I am, so he left without accepting any form of compensation. Not even a slice of cheeks. Not a pinch of ass. Can you believe that? What a waste. He leaped across the buildings, leaving the crowd staring in awe. They'd heard rumors of individuals with superpowers, people who fought monsters to keep civilians safe, but this was the first time they'd ever seen one in person. They couldn't help but stare in reverie, mesmerized by the superhuman's aura. But setting all that aside, and ignoring the sheer Chad energy of the hero, was no one else going to talk about those pink pockmarked shorts? Whose grandma was missing her panties? Because this was some weird bullshit. Anyway, we switch scenes to Seoyan High School, home to future lawyers, doctors, engineers, and of course OF models, or as I like to call them, ambassadors of the cheeks. In class 3 of the school, a teacher was diligently lecturing about natural disasters. He explained that natural disasters used to refer to sudden and catastrophic natural events that resulted in serious damage and casualties, e.g. typhoons, earthquakes, and the like. However, in recent days, the term had expanded to include any calamity that could not be stopped by human means, referring specifically to the emergence of monsters into society. As he explained this, the scene shifted to 2 delinquents slacking off at the back of the class. Instead of paying attention, they were busy watching a video of the recent fight between the hero and the monster. Turns out the mysterious man had made a name for himself on the streets, often referred to as White Cap, thanks to the signature white cap he wore whenever he fought monsters. He'd been clapping monster cheeks for the longest time, building himself a noticeable fan base among the local youth. As the 2 delinquents watched, they couldn't help but marvel at the clarity of the footage. Most videos featuring Whitecap had always been low quality and shot from far away. But this recent upload, submitted by a new anonymous account, captured the fight in what looked like 4K. It was almost as if the cameraman was breathing down their necks during the battle. Truly, a wondrous and daring feat. But setting that aside, they were in awe of Whitecap's sheer prowess, easily demolishing his enemy, especially that kick to the jaw. You'd think they were mortal enemies or something. Or worse, maybe the monster commented on his granny panties and he was venting his rage. Side note, those pants are really fucking me up. Does no one else see it? Moving on, the 2 bastards continued scrolling through the comments, flaming anyone who posted nonsense. They kept this up until they finally drew the teacher's attention. Just as he was about to call them out, an alarm suddenly blared, announcing an emergency. A monster, or rather, a Xenoterran, had been spotted near the port of Incheon, and all citizens were advised to stay clear of the area. Additionally, all nearby schools were ordered to close immediately, with students instructed to return home as quickly as possible. Upon hearing this, the students erupted into cheers. Sure, monster attacks were scary, but did they really compare to staying in school all day? Learning calculus and all that bullshit? They were better off shooting hoops at the court, or even taking their chances with the monster. For the lucky few, they could sneak off and get some cheeks on the side. Seemingly predicting their plans, the teacher told them to settle down. He understood their excitement about slacking off, but proper emergency protocols had to be followed. They were to exit the premises in an orderly fashion and head straight home. As for those planning a little slide-in on the way, all he could say was that maidens were living volcanoes these days, so they'd better not get burned. And if they did get burned, they'd better make sure she was a baddie, not one of the wildebeests some of you have been picking up. Yes, I'm talking to you. Back to the students. They joyfully exited the classroom. This continued until the panel focused on 2 in particular, a maiden lost in thought and a dude sleeping beside her. From the maiden's perspective, we learned a bit more about the monster calamity. A few years ago, the first monster appeared in Gangneung, laying waste to the city and killing over 70 people. Since then, monster attacks had become increasingly frequent, with the last one occurring just over a week ago. Now, with this latest alarm, it meant another attack was underway, an alarming increase in frequency. Sighing at the grim situation, she turned her head and finally noticed the dude sleeping beside her. Puzzled, she wondered how he could sleep through such a blaring alarm, especially since he seemed to be enjoying it, judging by his audible mumbling. She reached out to wake him, but was beaten to it when his phone rang. The sleeper was Kang Lim, the protagonist of the story and a certified badass, also known as White Cap, the vigilante hero. On the other end of the call was his homie and sidekick, Jury, briefing him on the monster attack. After reminding him to hurry his grandma panties wearing ass, Jury disconnected, leaving Kang to process the intel. That's when Kang noticed the baddie sitting beside him. Caught staring like a creep, the maiden quickly reminded him about the alarm and advised him to leave. Kang locked eyes with her for a moment, before unleashing the most outlandish yawn ever witnessed. Clearly, he wasn't fazed by the alarm in the slightest. On the contrary, she looked kinda bad. So how about dropping her number before she left? The maiden clicked her tongue in annoyance and immediately stood up to leave. A monster was attacking. People could die. And all this idiot was thinking about was pulling bitches. What kind of messed up priorities were those? She stormed out, leaving a horny Kang behind. Once she left, Kang immediately locked in. First, he checked his go bag, making sure everything was ready, especially his vigilante costume and earpiece. With the essentials confirmed, he snuck out of the classroom in search of a secluded spot to change. Meanwhile, at the port of Incheon, things were popping off. The monster was mid-massacre, forcing civilians to fight back or be obliterated in the chaos. One of them, a heavy cargo truck driver, rammed that bad boy straight at the monster, hoping to take it down on impact. Unfortunately, it barely tickled the Xenoterran and its monstrous constitution. It tanked the hit like a champ, stopping the truck with nothing but its body. Then, to the driver's horror, it cocked its arm back and delivered a crushing blow to the vehicle, and the man trapped inside. For some reason, it also felt the need to flash its cheeks while doing so. Kinda odd, but hey, who am I to judge the artist's weird fetishes? The panel shifted to other port workers hiding for their lives. The braver of the two peeked out to see the aftermath, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. A truck weighing tons had been effortlessly totaled by a creature of flesh. How absurd was that? What made it worse was that his hiding buddy was a total bitch, sobbing like a maiden instead of pulling himself together and finding a way out. Irritated beyond belief, he grabbed the guy by the shirt and yelled at him to lock in. If he kept sobbing like that, the monster would hear them, and that would be the end. Unfortunately, the warning came too late. The monster was already upon them. It crept up like it was playing Splinter Cell or some shit, scaring the life out of the duo. Back at the school, Kang had finished changing into his costume. He was on the phone with Jury, who was giving him live updates from the battlefield. And from the sound of it, things weren't looking good. Jury told him to hurry unless he wanted to arrive after everyone was already dead. Kang said bet and made his final preparations. With his school uniform stashed in the ceiling, he vaulted out the window and made a beeline for the port. Thanks to his superhuman abilities, he leapt across buildings with ease, rapidly closing the distance. Speaking of massacre, we cut back to the coward and the brave fool. After being discovered, they barely had time to react before the brave one was flattened by the monster's punch and sent flying like a rag doll. When he landed, there were no signs of life, his body reduced to a mangled, bloody mess. Seeing this, the sobbing coward tried to flee, but the monster was faster. With a casual swing of its palm, it slammed him into a container, crushing his head and upper torso like a ripe tomato. Done with that, it turned its attention to another worker attempting to escape. With agility completely unfitting of its size, it leapt across containers and quickly caught up. Grabbing the man by the head, it yeeted him across the port and straight into a cargo container. The impact left him barely able to move, coughing up blood. Unfortunately, the monster wasn't finished. It crept toward him, looming overhead like a god. The sight drained all color from the man's face. Still, the monster reached out to finish the job, only for a wrench to fly through the air and clock it in the head. The attack did no real damage, but it was enough to get its attention. Turning around, the monster saw the culprit, an old geezer clearly courting death. Meanwhile, Kang was still en route. His speed was ludicrous, covering distances faster than airplanes. As he closed in, Jury reported another update. The special Xenoterran defense forces had been deployed. Though they were complete trash and utterly worthless, Jury still warned Kang to avoid them so they wouldn't interfere. Kang said bet, and doubled his speed, finally laying eyes on the port. Back in the chaos, the old geezer was losing his shit. He yelled at the other man, On, to snap out of it. How many distractions did he need before On got his lazy ass up and escaped? Flinching under the monster's glare, the old man cursed his luck. He could have escaped alone, but his conscience wouldn't let him abandon his homie. Apologizing to his wife and kid in his heart, he accepted his fate. The monster glared at him, then turned and walked away, stunning both men. Just as they thought they'd survived, the monster said psych, grabbed a container, lifted it effortlessly, and hurled it straight at the incredulous geezer. Frozen in place, he couldn't process why the monster bothered pretending to leave if it was just going to kill him anyway. As the container of death hurtled toward him, a figure came flying in like a rocket. Kang, leg drawn back, With a devastating sidekick, he sent the container flying into the distance. The geezer stared in disbelief. Who was this guy? Where did he come from? And most importantly, did his cheeks really have to be that close to his face? He appreciated the help, but come on, boundaries please. Unbothered by the geezer's thoughts, Kang made his CHADY entrance, eyes locked on the monster. With a look that screamed, "I want all the smoke," he called it out. He didn't want peace. He wanted problems. Always. Thus, the two entered an intense stare-down, ready for the fade that would follow. Before they could clash, however, Kang took a beat to consult his partner and sidekick, Jury, asking if he should attempt communicating with the monster. Jury, who'd been monitoring the situation from the hidden camera in Kang's hat, told him to give it a try. Ever since they began their vigilante operation, they'd always made it a priority to try communicating with the monsters, mostly to understand them better and to figure out their motives and origins. If they could uncover those, then the likelihood of solving the monster problem would increase significantly. Unfortunately, they hadn't had much luck on that front just yet, as all the monsters instantly turned hostile. Still, they were hoping this time would be different. With that hope in mind, Kang initiated contact, asking the monster if it could understand him, and if it could, whether it would share where it came from and, most importantly, if they had fine monster bitches over there. The monster took a beat before responding with a growl, shocking the duo of hero and sidekick. But just before they could celebrate initiating successful contact, the growl became more guttural and loud, soon developing into a full-on bestial roar. Without so much as a warning, the monster dug its feet into the ground, shooting forward to commence the attack. It had both hands locked into a slamming position, using its incredible strength to pulverize Kang. Luckily, the hero was faster, so he barely evaded the attack, which left the ground in complete disarray. Before he could pull away, however, the monster pressed the attack, lashing out with a left pimp slap. The attack landed true, sending Kang flying like a runway hoe. He crashed heavily into a cargo container, and for a second, he felt the urge to call time out on this unjust ass whooping. Wasn't he the MC? Then why was he getting his ass folded? Locking back in, he leapt off the container, did a somersault mid-flight, and landed gracefully behind the monster, finally catching his breath. With a beat to spare, he reached out to Jury, telling him communication was futile. Jury agreed, reminding him that he'd watched the whole thing. But that aside, why was he letting the monster do him like that? He was practically getting bitch-slapped out there. Couldn't he lock in? Or had he developed some masochistic tendencies he didn't know about? How embarrassing. As the two conversed, the roaring of a chopper came from above, drawing their attention. The chopper belonged to LDS, a major news station, and it had come to report live on the battle at Incheon Port. Of course, the reporters weren't foolish, so they kept the altitude of the chopper at 1,900 feet, well above the enemy. From their vantage point, they reported on Whitecap and how he was getting folded, choked, and bitch-slapped by the monster, footage that was sure to go viral. In addition, they also reported on the arrival of the Xenoterran Special Forces, although no one was interested in that because they were, trash. Speaking of trash, the panel shifted to the Sakura Haruno of the superhuman world, the Xenoterran Special Forces. After arriving on the battlefield, the commander ordered all his men to stand down, clearly aware of their situation because they were, as I've said before, trash. His men, however, were confused by this. Hadn't they come there to fight monsters? Then why were they just standing there like bystanders? The commander replied that he must not have heard what the narrator was talking about. They were trash, not the redeemable Deku kind, but the completely hopeless Sakura, Aqua, Usopp kind. They had no business getting involved in a fight of this caliber. To put it into context, he explained to his men that Whitecap alone, based on their analysis, had the power and strength to wipe out their entire unit. The same was true for the monsters he fought. If either one decided to turn hostile against them, the only thing they could do was wash their necks and save them the trouble when they came to kill them. They were truly and without doubt complete garbage. Incredulous, one soldier looked at his commander oddly. If that was the case, then why the hell were they even there? The commander replied that first, it was for comedic relief for the homie NotNPC as he did this narration. Second, not all trash was useless trash. Just because they were lacking didn't mean they couldn't contribute to the situation. He said this while referring to the unit hidden in the van, their so-called Plan B. Back to the news report and Whitecap's clash with the monster. The whole ordeal was being broadcast live, meaning everyone at home and in the streets could see the fight. This included the baddie from before, who could very well be a waifu based on how much screen time she was getting. The same was true for the delinquents at school, who could possibly play a major role in the story as well. Now back to the actual fight. After tangling with the monster for a while and getting his cheeks clapped on every occasion, Kang finally put some distance between them. He was hoping to regroup and counterattack, but a left cross from the monster foiled his plans, forcing him to dodge pathetically. Rebounding off the cargo container, he shot toward the monster, opting to switch from defense to offense. His momentum was incredible, a hand cocked back to deliver a devastating punch. However, the monster hit him with a curveball. Just as he was ready to release that arm rocket, the monster shot out its tongue, catching Kang completely off guard. Thanks to his superb reflexes, he barely avoided the blow, though the move left him off balance, giving the monster a perfect opening to counterattack. Without missing the chance, it grabbed Kang by the leg, twirled him in the air like a princess, then yeeted his disoriented ass across the port, straight into the loving embrace of a thick-ass metal container. When the dust settled, all that was visible was a hole in the container and an awkward yet worried silence among those watching. Seeing this, the commander couldn't help but clench his cheeks. The situation had developed into one none of them had desired. With Whitecap out of commission, it was up to them to hold the fort until he got back up. But could they do it? Well, there was only one way to find out. He called out to Plan B, codename B, telling him it was his time to shine. B said bet, blew open the back of the van, grabbed the top, and somersaulted himself onto the roof, his landing as graceful and chatty as Spider-Man. With a rifle in hand, he took aim at the monster, releasing a huge round on its unsuspecting ass. The bullet traveled in stealth, caught the monster off guard, and landed a direct headshot on its Voldemort face-looking ass. That shot laid it out cold, making the onlookers wonder if the job was done. But before they could celebrate, the monster spanked the ground, using the rebound to slowly rise back up. Under the onlookers' incredulous gazes, its cheeks slowly turning crimson, it glared at the commander, seemingly asking, "Who shot that fucking bullet?" To this, the commander almost shit his pants. B, on the other hand, cocked another hot one into the chamber, let it fly, and landed another headshot on the monster. Regrettably, it tanked that one as well, seemingly unfazed by the bullets. Relentless, B continued chambering rounds and firing them, each one landing squarely on the monster's head. However, despite the huge caliber, armor-piercing rounds, and excellent marksmanship, the monster tanked all the bullets like they were nothing, steadily closing the distance. When it tanked the last shot, already close enough to initiate its counterattack, its aggressive momentum was suddenly interrupted by a shift in the air. Something wasn't right, and B sensed it as well. They both collectively turned toward the disturbance, the source of the unsettling aura they were feeling. The cargo container Kang had been thrown into. To their shock, a series of clanging sounds echoed, proving that someone was clawing their way out. Before long, Kang emerged, his face partially hidden in the shadows. A striking visual indeed. But contrary to the pissed-off state one might expect, he was surprisingly chill, almost as if he hadn't been bitch-slapped into a container just minutes ago. His main concern was that he'd avoided landing in the ocean, rather than the severe embarrassment of getting tossed around like a ragdoll. Seeing that he was fine, Jury finally heaved a sigh of relief. He told Kang to forget about initiating contact. The monster clearly had no intention of cooperating, or it simply lacked the ability to do so. Moving forward, the only thing that should be speaking was his hands as he fed it that left-right, "Good night." Kang said bet and locked in, his aura suddenly growing intense. He marched up to the monster, his killing intent overwhelming. The monster flinched at the change, but by then it was already too late. Kang took another step forward, and in the next second, his figure blurred out of sight. When he reappeared, he was already above the monster, his leg whipping down in a nasty axe kick. Without any surprises, the kick landed, caving the monster's head in up to the jaw. Pressing the attack, Kang lunged in with some judo-type shit, shoving his hand into the monster's jaw. Then, spinning on his heels, he yanked the bastard, stomped hard to stabilize his footing, and hurled the absolute, honest-to-God living shit out of the monster, burying its head into the concrete. The attack thundered like lightning, kicking up shockwaves that rippled across the area. Even the special forces and the news chopper weren't spared, as both scrambled to avoid being swept away by the pressure. When things finally calmed down and the dust settled, the outcome of the attack was visible, and damn, was it glorious. The monster had turned into a fleshy plant, buried deep into the ground. What made it funnier was that its skinny legs were still shaking, almost as if it wanted to piss itself or something. As for the audience, their reactions were hilarious. Several baddies felt their panties drop, an involuntary reaction to such manly dominance. The other onlookers didn't fare much better either, their jaws hanging wide open, clearly mesmerized by Kang's might. It took a while for the reporters to pull themselves together and continue covering the scene. But just before they could do so, they noticed something that made them flinch. Kang noticed it too, and his gaze snapped back to the monster, which was unbelievably trying to get back up. The bastard wasn't dead just yet. It dug its head out of the rubble, glaring at Kang with undisguised fury. But before it could act on that hate, its body gave out, and it crashed back to the ground, unable to rise again. Seeing this, Jury finally heaved a sigh of relief. For a second, he'd thought the monster was back for round 2. Kang replied that he didn't mind, whether it was round 2, 3, or even 6. If the monster got up again, he'd gladly feed it the fade. He didn't mind clapping monster cheeks for as long as it took. Besides, he'd felt its head burst when he threw it, so he knew it wouldn't pose much of a problem. As he said this, he thought back to his fight with another monster in Anmiondo. That one had been way more troublesome. Though he hated to admit it, that monster had almost pushed him to his wits' end. Jury also recalled the fight, noting that the monster had indeed been formidable. Luckily, they hadn't run into anything of that caliber since. As the two conversed, the panel shifted to a mysterious man aura farming from a distant vantage point. His face was hidden in the shadows, giving him a low-key CHADY presence. He'd been there to watch the entire fight, and from his smile, he was clearly satisfied with what he'd seen. Kang was just as ruthless and bloodthirsty as the rumors said, and more importantly, his strength was the real deal. Addressing his equally mysterious partner, he asked if she agreed with his assessment. She remained silent, her face sinking deeper into the shadows. Seeing this, the man chuckled before leaping off the edge, instructing her to wait for him. Whatever he had to do wouldn't take long. He landed behind Kang, catching him completely off guard. With a new potential enemy in the fray, Kang immediately went on high alert, his senses pushed to the extreme. He turned to face the newcomer, confidently asking who he was and what he wanted. The man, clearly leaning too deep into this aura farming business, let his long hair bristle in the wind as he replied to Kang's question. It didn't matter who he was. What mattered was that he came in peace. Well, kinda. Wasn't he Whitecap, the superhuman? They had a lot to discuss. He said this while flashing the creepiest smile imaginable. Damn. Walking closer, he closed the distance between himself and Kang, alarming Jury, who warned him to be careful. Additionally, he couldn't help but wonder where the mysterious yet sketchy man had come from. Kang replied with a nod and immediately locked in on the sketchy fella. Because of this, he also noticed that the man hadn't come alone, but had his partner monitoring the situation from a high vantage point. As for why she chose that place of all places, he didn't know. Maybe it was strategic, or maybe she just wanted to aura farm. Who knows what in the piccolo she had going on. Either way, he alerted Jury, warning him of the potential threat and telling him to keep an eye on her. Meanwhile, on the reporter's side, they were just as taken aback as Kang was by the situation. Just a few seconds ago, they were reporting on the glorious battle between Kang and the Xenoterran, only for the subsequent events to catch them completely off guard. Regardless, they were always ready for juicy scoops, so they locked in on the potential altercation, focusing all their cameras on the duo. Though they couldn't make out what was being discussed because of the distance, they gleaned enough from the tense atmosphere to know that things weren't right, and reported the same to the curious audience watching intently. This included the delinquents from Kang's school, alongside the possible waifu mentioned before. Closer to the battlefield, the Xenoterran special forces were equally at a loss. The CHADY lieutenant, who didn't know what to make of the situation, turned to his commander for guidance. With such an odd occurrence, what were they supposed to do? The commander replied that he didn't know either. Technically speaking, they were not Whitecap's allies, just acquaintances who occasionally helped each other. Thus, if a fight really broke out, it wasn't certain whose side they'd take. Regardless, he told his men to get ready. However the situation played out next, they'd handle it as it came. Whether that meant retreating and letting the two battle it out, or assisting Whitecap in fighting the enemy. Conversely, he also told them to prepare for the off chance that they might have to fight Whitecap himself. Back to the hero in question. He was oddly being roasted by the sketchy man, who complained that his skills were rather disappointing. The battle wasn't nearly as eventful as he'd hoped it would be. Maybe he was expecting too much, but Kang definitely fell short in that regard. Still, he had to admit that it was kinda fun, especially with Kang's flair and strength. It low-key reminded him of the hero Ketchup Man. For context, Ketchup is the protagonist of a popular TV series, The Invincible Ketchup Man, which is widespread in their manhwa world. Interestingly, he also owns a bakery, because how else would you explain all that cake back there? Pause. Being compared to Ketchup, his idol, Kang immediately became flustered, his face turning red. He fumbled with his reply, alarming Jury, who knew just how weak he was to flattery. Despite his incredible strength, our boy's defense against sweet talk was basically zero. With this in mind, Jury yelled at him to get it together. He told him to forget about the rosy words and focus on the foe. Who was he, and where had he come from? Regrettably, Kang was still flustered, so he ended up speaking nonsense, asking, "Who are you from?" Completely embarrassing himself and triggering Jury, who realized he couldn't depend on the tsundere and had to lock in for the both of them. Sweet words might confuse the gullible Kang, but there was no way they would affect him. His instincts were screaming that this sketchy dude was a threat. Speaking of which, the sussy dude continued his banter with Kang. He told him that he was an avid fan, following his deeds since the beginning. From the news coverage to the clips of his battles spreading online, he'd watched them all. Even common bystander streams hadn't escaped his eyes. What was funny was that whenever a Xenoterran alert went off, he would somehow always appear on the scene, almost as if he already knew where to go. Wasn't that interesting? And how did he know exactly where to go? He asked this while looking at the camera on Kang's hat. Grinning playfully, he told Kang not to worry about it. He wasn't there to cause trouble. Although he was glad to finally see him in action firsthand, he had other matters to attend to and hadn't come there purposely for him. Plus, he wasn't his enemy, so why worry? Kang replied solemnly, asking why he should believe him. As far as he was concerned, the mysterious man was sketchy as hell, giving him Taemin vibes. If he wasn't careful, he might just get stabbed in the back. To this, the sketchy man, who we'll temporarily call Foxeye, kept his mouth shut, refusing to answer. Jury, on the other hand, reminded Kang of a similar encounter in Samchok. Back then, mysterious men in black suits had shown up claiming to be allies, but the second Kang dropped his guard, they tased him, obviously planning to kidnap him. To Jury, this situation was eerily similar, so he advised Kang to proceed with caution. They didn't know if Foxeye was working with the government or if he was a military asset. Either way, it was better for him to leave the place as fast as possible. Kang acknowledged the warning and prepared to leave, but before he could make his move, Foxeye mentioned something that caught his attention. He said that ever since the appearance of people with special abilities like Kang, the world had chosen to label them with a special title, superhuman. Well, he would have him know that he too was a superhuman, just like him. On top of that, they weren't the only ones. There were several others besides them, each living their own lives, either privately or publicly. But one thing they all had in common was that they defied common sense. Whatever people considered normal was utterly irrelevant before them, easily overturned by their absurd power, way beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Hearing this, Kang was surprised, but Jury easily accepted it, having already suspected as much. He'd heard rumors of 2 superhumans in America and Europe, so this news didn't come as much of a surprise. Even so, as far as he knew, Kang was the only superhuman in Korea, so where had this bastard crawled out from? Speaking of America, the scene switched over to an unidentified city somewhere in the country. In a secret base giving off Batcave vibes, an operator was watching the scene from Korea live. Although he was equally confused about the developments, he couldn't help but point out that Foxeye seemed suspicious as fuck. Addressing the person behind him, he asked what they thought. The figure, who turned out to be female, or rather, she-male, replied that she wasn't sure, but one thing was definitely clear. The one with the long hair was creepy as hell. Plus, she couldn't shake the feeling that she knew him from somewhere. Leaning closer, she asked the operator if they could get audio from the conversation. The operator replied that it was impossible. Although he was also curious, the feed wasn't picking up what they were saying. Elsewhere in Scotland, inside a Burger King, plagiarized from Burger King, the same scene from Korea was being broadcast live. Among those watching was a chubby queen, whom I'm assuming will be important to the story later on. Right now, however, her friend urged her to hurry up, or they'd miss their Justin Bieber concert. It's strange that such a geezer is still excited by such things. But hey, who am I to judge? Meanwhile, in Moscow, a similar scene was playing out. Two men were glued to the screen, watching the broadcast from Korea with fervent gazes. Although they were just as clueless as everyone else about Foxeye's origins, they unanimously agreed that he was rather unsettling, a true sore to look at. Which is honestly hilarious, because it's like the pot calling the kettle black. Don't these bastards own a mirror? Anyway, back to Incheon, Korea. Having recovered from the shock, Kang told Foxeye that he didn't care. Whether he was a superhuman or not had nothing to do with him, so he should just leave him alone. He said this while turning around, clearly intending to leave. To this, Foxeye laughed awkwardly, asking why he was in such a hurry. Hadn't he said they had a lot to discuss? Fine. If he was unwilling to listen right now, then they'd just have to continue the conversation later, probably when he dropped by his school for a chat. Hearing this, Kang immediately stopped, a shiver running down his spine. He turned to look at Foxeye, disbelief etched on his face. Foxeye smirked smugly, asking why he was so shocked. Could it be because he knew who he was when he wasn't out here playing hero? That he was just another regular high school kid? Come on. It wasn't that hard to figure out, was it? Flabbergasted, both Kang and Jury stayed silent, too stunned to speak. They thought they'd been careful in hiding the truth, so how had this bastard known? Foxeye told them not to overthink it. He had his own ways. Plus, they shouldn't worry. Their secret was safe with him. No other soul apart from the three of them would know that Whitecap was a teenager still in school, and that acting as his sidekick was Jury, a maidenless virgin with red hair. He would definitely not tell a soul. But since they were already on the topic, could he take a moment to mention how impressive Jury was? He was aware that Jury was the true mastermind of the team, designing both the mask and the gear. Not to mention, Kang's quick response to monster attacks was credited to him as well. It would be a lie if he said he wasn't jealous. With that said, was it inappropriate to confess that he'd lost count of the number of times he'd stopped himself from outright kidnapping him and forcing him to be part of his team? It took more willpower than either of them could imagine. But since they were already talking about it, he might as well make up his mind and pay Jury a visit instead, seeing as Kang clearly had no interest in talking to him. Who knows? Maybe Jury would turn out to be a better conversationalist. Terrified, Jury felt his hair stand on end, his mind racing with ideas about how Foxeye knew so much about them. Just how did that bastard do it? Chuckling sinisterly, Foxeye once again repeated that they shouldn't worry. Everything he'd said was just harmless banter. There was truly no need for either of them to get worked up. To this, Kang told him to miss him with that bullshit. If he genuinely believed Foxeye meant no harm, then he'd spent his life living in vain. Fine. Since he was asking for smoke, purposely taunting him with sarcastic remarks, they'd just have to settle this right then and there. He told Foxeye to prepare himself. Things were about to get real. Realizing things were spiraling out of control, Jury tried to talk him out of it, warning him that it was a trap. However, Kang was too frustrated to listen. As far as he was concerned, any threat to Jury, his only family, couldn't be allowed to live. He had to make sure Foxeye died that day. Facing his murderous intent, Foxeye laughed even louder, clearly unfazed by the pressure. He told Kang that he truly didn't wish to fight him, and that peaceful correspondence was still possible between them. However, if he chose the path of smoke, then smoke he shall get. Literally. His aura suddenly changed, manifesting as thick wisps of inky smoke. Kang said, "Bet," and lunged at him, his body moving so fast he broke the sound barrier. Still unfazed, Fox-Eye tracked his movements, his demeanor screaming that this would be lightweight. Everyone else, however, was beyond shocked, wondering how things had spiraled to this point. Ignoring their concerns, Kang shot forward, launching himself at Fox-Eye with a Superman punch. Fox-Eye responded leisurely, raising his arm to block with a palm strike. This completely stopped Kang's attack, leaving not just him, but Juri absolutely flabbergasted. Relentless, Kang pressed the attack, yanking his hand back to counter with a backhand swing. However, Fox-Eye dodged that too, nimbly jumping aside to evade the strike. Then, in a move that left everyone watching incredulous, he literally, and I'm not joking, landed on his arm, using his hand as a perch. With a tone bleeding contempt, he asked Kang if that was all he had, because it sure felt like he wasn't trying at all. Damn. Then, with even more graceful and nimble movements, he leapt off Kang's arm, somersaulted thrice mid-air, and landed a short distance away, all because he could. Still maintaining the contempt bleeding through his lips, he told Kang to take the fight seriously if he hoped to even stand a chance against him. Such half-hearted attacks wouldn't get him anywhere, if not straight to an early grave. Besides, courtesy and sympathy had no place on a real battlefield, so what the hell was he even doing? Growing more stern, he told Kang to remember what he'd said before. He too was a superhuman. So if Kang decided to go down this route, to seek him out for some fade, he'd better be prepared to give it everything he had. Otherwise, the only thing promised to him would be death. He said this while releasing an intense, bone-chilling aura, proving that he meant every word. Kang wanted to respond, but Fox-Eye cut in again. He told Kang to think it over carefully. Apart from the fight between them, he also had to consider the bigger picture. If they truly fought each other, there would be nothing left of this place. Everything and everyone around them would be dragged into the conflict, so he'd better think carefully before making his next move. As for himself, he was down for whatever, so Kang could bring it on any time. Kang took a moment to think and realized that what Fox-Eye said made sense. In addition, Juri whispered in his ear, encouraging him to handle the situation more delicately. He explained that the cost-benefit ratio of fighting Fox-Eye right now wasn't worth it. First, they knew nothing about him. Second, everything and everyone around them would indeed be implicated, and Kang wouldn't want that. And finally, and most importantly, Kang had never faced another superhuman before. Who knew how things would go? Judging by how easily Fox-Eye had humbled him moments ago, fighting definitely wasn't the way to go. Seeing Kang hesitate, Fox-Eye chimed in again, his relaxed demeanor returning. He told Kang he'd made the right choice. A battle between them wouldn't have benefited anyone, especially Kang. Then, with the same nonchalance he'd had upon arriving, he briskly turned to leave, informing Kang that they'd meet again. As for their earlier conversation, they'd wrap that up at their next meeting as well. Kang studied him for a moment before calling out, telling him to wait. With a face that screamed, "I won't settle for this," he asked for Fox-Eye's name. If he couldn't even leave that behind, then he might as well buckle up for a brawl, because there was no way Kang was letting him walk away. To show his sincerity and goodwill, he introduced himself first, saying that he was Kang Lim. Fox-Eye smiled at the taunt before responding, stating that his name was Nanki. As for his other details, Kang would have to earn that information. Then he turned around and left, regrouping with his partner, who was revealed to be Danyang. Seeing through his brave facade, Danyang asked to take a look at his arm. Turns out Kang's attack wasn't as useless as it seemed. He'd actually dealt significant damage to Nanki, enough to leave a bruise. Puzzlingly, Nanki had opted to keep it hidden until Danyang exposed him. Responding with the same carefree smile, he told her not to worry about it. It was just a small bruise. He'd be golden in no time. But that aside, it was about time they left the place. Danyang nodded, and the two vanished, teleporting directly from the port. This left Kang, Juri, and everyone watching completely flabbergasted. Partly because they'd never imagined such sci-fi abilities actually existed, but mostly because the altercation ended far too anticlimactically for their taste. For example, the group watching from the States openly expressed their dissatisfaction, saying they'd been hoping for some fun shit to happen. But with an ending like that, how could anyone feel satisfied? The same vibe was true for the party in Moscow. One of them outright cursed Foxeye. He'd arrived with such swagger, so how could he just leave like that? His partner replied that it was the logical thing to do. If they'd fought, the battle would have implicated everyone, possibly leveling the entire port. From that perspective, not fighting was indeed the right choice. The brawny man replied that he understood the logic, but damn it, that didn't mean he liked it. Plus, wasn't it more fun when things went to shit? A little chaos never hurt anyone. Shifting back to the port, Kang was just about to leave when voices called out for him to stop. It was the old geezer and his man, who had come to express their gratitude in person. Without Kang, they would have definitely died there, so a sincere thank you was the least they could offer. Kang said, "Bet," rejected the old man's invitation to lunch, and swiftly departed, crushing the concrete as he leapt away. His silhouette soon became a fleeting blur, shooting into the distance amidst the Special Forces' awe. After he left, the commander finally snapped back to his senses and began organizing post-battle logistics. Casualties had to be tallied, and most importantly, the Xenoterran's corpse had to be secured. With that, he briskly issued orders, soon turning the port into a hive of activity. While this was going on, Agent B voiced his own complaints. He informed the commander that the experimental ammunition was severely lacking. It wasn't just the shape or explosiveness. The whole thing was a letdown. If they went into battle against Xenoterrans with such trash, the only outcome would be a one-sided massacre. The commander responded with a grave expression, indicating that he understood. He promised to speak with the researchers and hopefully have them develop weapons capable of supporting them in their fight against monsters. B grimaced, crushed the shell casing, and walked away, leaving the commander lost in thought. As he mulled over their uncertain future, a call came in, snapping him out of it. Looking at the caller ID, the commander's expression immediately changed. Damn it. Why did it have to be him? Still, it was his direct superior, so he had no choice but to answer. Upon connecting, the commander immediately began giving a situation report. He told General Ojin Baik that the battle was over, and Whitecap had left after defeating the Xenoterran. The general asked why he was only reporting in now. Hadn't he given specific orders to be informed the moment the situation was resolved? The commander fumbled his reply, saying he was just about to call. The general told him to spare the excuses. Since he was hard of hearing, the commander should listen carefully to his next words. The safe transportation of the Xenoterran corpse was the highest priority, and no mishaps would be tolerated. The corpse had to be loaded onto Cargo 101 and leave the port securely. Everything after that would be handled personally by the general. The commander's role, however, had to be executed flawlessly. The commander responded with a firm salute, stating that it would be done. In fact, the corpse was already being loaded as they spoke, and it wouldn't be long before it departed. The general nodded in approval and told him to get to it. Once the cargo ship was airborne, it would no longer be under his jurisdiction, so he should focus on withdrawing his troops from the port as soon as possible. The commander saluted and ended the call, clearly seething at the general's arrogance. Still, he was his superior. What could he do about it? Meanwhile, on the general's end, barely a second passed before he dialed another number. From his demeanor, it was clear he too answered to someone higher up. When the call connected, the general endured the other party's arrogance and delivered his report. He spoke about the Xenoterran attack, the casualties, and Whitecap's role in resolving the crisis. Halfway through, however, the other party rudely told him to get to the point. He had no interest in hearing such nonsense. The general complied and spoke about the corpse instead, reporting that it was already en route and would arrive at Area Falcon by midnight the following day. He attempted to mention something else, but the man cut him off again, saying his time was precious. If the general had anything else to say, he could save it for later, or keep it to himself. Either was fine. Then, with a tone dripping with malice, he warned the general never to waste his time like that again. If he ever reported useless matters such as civilian casualties again, it would be the last report he ever gave. His time was too valuable to be spent on such things. Hanging up, the man continued ranting, saying he didn't give a damn. Why should he care about a few nobodies dying? It was bad enough he had to give this goddamn speech, and to a room full of vermin no less. Coughing to steady himself, the mysterious man walked onto the stage amid cheers and applause. Behind him hung a banner proclaiming hope for the new generation, giving the scene a deeply ironic twist. The bastard, the same man who didn't give a damn about civilian lives, was a politician. Ironically, he was widely proclaimed to be the beacon of hope for the new generation, the man destined to lead the country into an age of peace and innovation. What a joke. His name was Gerald Marcus. Back at the port, the cargo ship finished loading and took off, disappearing into the distance soon after. As it left, the lieutenant couldn't help but ask the commander what kind of ship it was, and why there was so much secrecy surrounding it. The commander replied that he didn't know, and that such intel wasn't meant for the likes of them anyway. Sometimes, the less you knew, the better. At the same time, Nanki and Danyang, hidden nearby, watched the cargo ship depart. It turned out their true objective at the port hadn't been to fight Kang at all, but to track the ship, or more specifically, the Xenoterran corpse and the mysterious Area Falcon it was being transported to. Did someone say super soldier secret research? Switching scenes, we're taken to an intense battlefield. In the fight, Ketchup Man, the hero with straight hands, chokes the shit out of a villain, giving him the undisputed, undefeated, gender-neutral treatment of the world, the Wayne Brady special, choke a bitch. He yokes the bastard by the neck, warning him that he'll only ask his question one last time. Where the hell was his master, Sherlock? Where was that rat, brainiac wannabe bastard hiding right now so he could kill him himself? The villain, who's being choked so hard he's literally frothing at the mouth, mumbles that he can't breathe, let alone speak. How does he expect him to snitch if he can't even open his mouth? Mistaking his silence for defiance, Ketchupman tells him fine. Since he's decided to stay loyal to that fiend, he'll just have to run him the same fate he'd prepared for Sherlock. He cocks his hand back, preparing to give the poor fool the yeeting of his life. To this, the villain screams for him to hold the fuck up. He'll talk. Matter of fact, he wants nothing more than to snitch right now. The spirit of snitching is high in him, but goddammit, can he at least release his neck so he can snitch? How is he supposed to work under such circumstances? Unfortunately for the villain, his words would never reach Ketchup Man because the hero had him in a chokehold, and all his grievances were shouted in his mind, never to be heard out loud. Thus, without much suspense, and still believing the villain was being defiant, Ketchupman yeets him to the ground, where he crashes with a miserable groan and a cloud of dust. Feeling that blow was insufficient, the brute hero dives after the villain, cocking his hand back for his signature technique, the invincible ketchup smash. An all-inclusive, gender-neutral smash to the gut, rocking the villain's shit and leveling the ground beneath him amidst his pitiful screams. Exhaling a breath of turbid air, Ketchupman tells the whimpering villain to toughen up. Why is he screaming so much when he's barely used a fraction of his power in that punch? Is he just weak, or is he pretending? Regardless, he makes it clear that it has no impact on him. If he decides to feed him Fade, he'll definitely do so. But lucky for him, he's feeling rather benevolent right now, so he'll let him go, on the condition that he passes a message to Sherlock. He tells the villain to inform his master that he's the guardian of Earth, and no one, and he means no one, will threaten it as long as he's alive. Meanwhile, as Ketchupman dishes out his vigilante, Batman-like justice, a crowd of onlookers is attracted to the commotion and quickly gathers around. They say a bunch of glazing things about the hero, some even making it slightly suspect with their zesty remarks. Nevertheless, it's obvious they truly admire him and genuinely appreciate his crime-fighting deeds. It's not only them, even the reporters who show up afterward proceed to glaze Ketchup Man, reporting on his glorious fight and embellishing his feats by saying he defeated the enemy in an instant, whooping him so badly the bastard almost cried out for his mommy. Speaking of which, Ketchup Man was indeed blitzing the shit out of the villain. He hits him with JoJo's Muda Muda, forcing the villain to cry out in pain and protest. Didn't he say he'd release him? Then what the hell was this shit? Still hitting him, Ketchup Man replies that he's changed his mind. Just like he can decide to be a villain, he too can decide to run him this Fade and speak to his face directly, with his fists, of course. Done with his Gotham justice, Ketchup Man rises to the crowd's cheers, his face a mask of competence and savagery. With the cheers as a backdrop, he strikes a pose, flaunting his bubble butt and physique straight out of a gooner's wet dream. As this happens, the reporters continue to glaze him, calling him Earth's mightiest hero, and the one who will protect them from any evil that comes. It's also during this time that we learn the recent events weren't real at all, but scenes from the popular TV show, The Invincible Ketchup Man. And watching this show is the fanboy Kang Lim, nestled before the TV, with his sidekick Jury sleeping carelessly behind him. Startled by the commotion, a grumpy Jury wakes up to find Kang up to his shenanigans again. He asks why he's watching TV instead of resting like he ought to. Isn't he tired from his earlier fight? Kang, nursing an obvious puffy face and bloated eye, replies that he has no other choice. He's truly addicted to the show. As long as it airs, he has to watch it, even if the sky is falling. That aside, he encourages Jury to watch the latest episode, saying it was epic. He then proceeds to go into more detail, forcing Jury to tell him to shut up lest he spoil the entire plot. Realizing his oversight, Kang shuts his mouth and focuses on something else, specifically how Nanki had compared him to Ketchup Man, his idol. This makes his face hot, and he can't help but blush at the thought. Jury ignores his fanboy friend and heads back to sleep. Remembering something, he asks Kang why he's still there. Doesn't he have to go to school? Or is he fanboying so hard he's forgotten that school isn't closed today? Startled, Kang shoots to his feet, his silhouette disappearing from the room soon after. As he scrambles to collect his things and rush out, he grumbles about the absurdity of the situation. Wasn't the Xenoterran attack just a few hours ago? How could school already be open? Jury, pissed that Kang didn't close the door behind him, yells that the monster was already dead, so why wouldn't school be open? He tells him to hurry his ass up, otherwise he'll truly be late. A few minutes later, en route to school, the frantic Kang is drawn to a conversation taking place ahead of him. The topic is Whitecap, his secret identity, and his latest fight against the Xenoterran and Nanki. One guy, clearly a hater, states that Whitecap nearly got his shit rocked. The powerful punch he threw at Nanki was blocked effortlessly, making him believe Whitecap would have been cooked if they'd actually fought. His friend counters, saying that although he was rocked, he wouldn't go as far as to say his shit would have been cooked. Whitecap was equally formidable after all. The hater insists, encouraging him to ask anyone else. They should have seen it too. His friend snaps back, telling him to shut his mouth. He sure has a lot to say for a keyboard warrior who hides behind a screen while others fight for their lives. Regardless of what he thinks, Whitecap is a hero, and he won't accept puny bastards sullying his name. Taken aback, the hater asks what he's on about. He'd made a careless remark. Surely that wasn't enough for him to go off like that. His friend tells him to watch his mouth now that he knows. Whitecap constantly risks his life to protect them from Xenoterrans. It would do him well to keep his thoughtless words to himself. Triggered, the hater lashes out, telling him to miss him with that bullshit. Whitecap a hero? Who told him that? Didn't he hear the rumors? That Whitecap is a military experiment? Probably a cyborg created by the government to combat the rampaging Xenoterrans. Hearing this, even Kang was low-key pissed. Him a cyborg? Who came up with such nonsense? Before he could react, the loyal homie snaps first, threatening to act on behalf of Whitecap and beat his ass if he keeps spreading rumors. The hater tells him to bring it. He welcomes the beef. Just as the two are about to throw down, the loyal homie accidentally bumps into someone from behind. The duo freezes the moment they realize who it is. A Goliath-looking bastard with a face only a mother could love. Taik Chue. Terrified, they rush to apologize, wishing they could escape before the psycho lost his shit. Unfortunately, Choi has no intention of letting them go so easily. He blocks them, asking if they have a death wish. Are they really that eager to die this early in the morning? His gaze flicks sideways, landing on Kang watching the spectacle. Instantly enraged, he calls him out, asking what the hell he's looking at. Does he have a similar death wish? If not, he'd better get his ass out of there before he makes him. Kang agrees and turns to leave, whispering a quiet apology. At the same time, Choi decides the trio isn't worth the hassle and turns away, growling at them to watch their surroundings next time. Especially Kang, who, for some reason, pissed him off even more. He warns him to stay clear, or he'll rip his eyes out next time. Choi trudges off, leaving the duo gossiping. One friend explains that Taik Choi is part of the Kundo crew, an up-and-coming gang making waves lately. It started at Mabong Junior High, where their leader, Kundo Park, beat and subjugated the local gangsters, formally taking them under his wing. Since then, the crew has grown exponentially, powerful enough to rival real gangs in Incheon, not just school bullies. For some reason, the whole crew transferred to Seoyeon High, officially taking it over. As for the brute from earlier, he's the enforcer, Taik motherfucking Chue. Stressed, the loyal homie wonders why those bastards even came to their school. If they want to play street, why not do it in the real streets? Either way, they're screwed. He hopes he never runs into them again. He even pities Kang, just a bystander who looked the wrong way at the wrong time. But the die is cast, and all they can do is stay as far away from the Kundo crew as possible. As for Kang, he can go die for all they care. Skipping forward, we arrive at Class 1 to 3 of Seoyeon High. Inside, the baddie from earlier is startled awake by someone calling her name. Still dazed and pissed, her nap was interrupted. Hong snaps at the perpetrator, a caked-up waifu seated in front of her, asking what she wants. The friend, unfazed, tells her to forget that and asks about her face. Why is she so bruised? Was she out boxing again? Hong replies that maybe she was. But what business is it of hers? She isn't her mom, so why the nagging? The friend, Jinju Yo, a first year just like her, looks at Hong sadly before flicking her gaze away, landing on Kang, who just so happens to be passing by at that moment. Noticing the handsome Poppy, Jinju calls out to him, telling him his fly is down. Startled, Kang takes a second to load before scurrying to the side, desperately trying to recover his lost aura. Unfortunately for him, his nakedness had already been witnessed by Jinju and Hong, the best baddies in the story thus far. Getting up to leave, Jinju whispers to Hong that her class is full of poppies. If she knows of any others, she should send them her way. Hong tells her to fuck off, then grows more serious, pointing out the faint smell of cigarettes on her. Was she hanging out with those weirdos again? Jinju throws her words right back at her, telling her not to nag so much. She wasn't her mom. Pausing at the entrance, she turns to Hong with a mischievous smile and proposes a deal. She'll stop hanging out with the crew if Hong quits boxing. So, do they have a deal or nah? Hong sighs in defeat, deeming her hopeless. But just as she's about to say her piece, she notices something that catches her attention. Kang still fiddling with his zipper. Matter of fact, the idiot had actually broken it, exposing his boxers and draining whatever aura he had left. Seeing this, Hong, last name Muhi, snickers, amused, deeming him hopeless too. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, a fishing boat is seen surfing the waves. As it cruises through the water, a silhouette stealthily splashes in pursuit, drawing the captain's attention. Locking onto the bizarre sound, the captain hook-looking bastard zeroes in, wondering what the hell was testing his patience this early in the morning. To his horror, the silhouette flashes beside the boat, casting a huge, ominous shadow in the water. Whatever it was large as hell, and dear old Captain Popeye was in some serious shit. Before that, though, let's flash back to 5 minutes earlier to give more context to the incoming fade. Turns out the Popeye bastard wasn't the only person on the boat. There was also a second fisherman, and of course a cute plushie, which is soon revealed to be a gift for the second fisherman's daughter. He explains that today is his daughter Ruby's birthday, and he bought her the penguin as a gift. The price was dirt cheap, so he feels some type of way about it. But regardless, he knows she'll like it, so that's all that matters. The first fisherman, who I'll call Popeye, replies that Ruby is a princess, and princesses deserve nice things, not dirt cheap dolls bought on the low. The man counters, arguing that the gift isn't as thoughtless as he imagines. He explains that Ruby's dream is to go searching for penguins in Antarctica, so although the gift might be financially convenient, it will still mean a lot to her since it directly relates to her interests. Popeye agrees and shifts the topic, asking when he plans to go see her. He can't possibly be working on his princess's birthday after all. Glasses replies that he'll be leaving soon. The moment his shift ends at lunchtime, he's gone, so Popeye better not come up with some overtime bullshit. If he does, he'll be like the mafia and make him sleep with the fishes. Popeye laughs, replying that he wouldn't do such a thing. As for making him sleep with the fishes, good luck with that. He won't even need his special spinach to fold his ass. Glasses laughs as well and heads into the cabin. As he does, he laments that his daughter has been growing more and more distant lately, and it's all because of his job. It keeps him so busy he barely has time to spend with her. Just the other day she told him she barely recognizes his face, and that hit him hard. So as a result, he's decided to cut down on work and spend more time with his princess. Hopefully, after this birthday, he'll never hear hurtful things like his daughter forgetting his face ever again. Popeye sympathizes and reflects on his own situation with his daughter. Painfully, he realizes he's never given her a proper gift, not even on her birthday. He can't help but grow melancholic, wondering if it's too late. She's already an adult after all. Noticing this, Glasses tells him not to give up. Even if she's grown, there's still time to make things right. Popeye nods and changes the topic, hoping to distract himself from the ache in his heart. He tells Glasses to place the doll in the cabin. Otherwise, the seawater might mess up the thoughtful gift he picked out. As he says that, the timeline catches up to the present moment, right when he notices the shadow in the water. And similar to how things played out before, the shadow flashes to the boat's side, puzzling Popeye, who is suddenly getting a very bad feeling about the situation. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, Glasses continues his banter, completely oblivious to the dire turn of events outside. He says something about the plushie, but obviously Popeye is too distracted by the looming shadow to pay it any heed. His eyes are locked onto the silhouette, evident horror flashing within them as the shadow shoots out of the water, arm raised to deliver a deadly blow. Before Popeye can react, the arm comes down with the might of a demigod, obliterating him along with the lower half of the fishing boat. The boat sways violently, rocking Glasses, who struggles to understand what the hell is going on. Was Poseidon attacking them or something? Otherwise, why would the boat be throwing it back like that? He heads out of the cabin, ignores the narrator's wild remarks, and goes to investigate exactly what is happening. As he steps outside, he comes face to face with a scene that will haunt him for the rest of his life. A life that is bound to be rather short based on what's going on right now. A monster, or rather, a Xenoterran, has squashed the shit out of Popeye, flattened his head, and is now standing in the boat, glaring at him menacingly. The sight scares the hell out of Glasses, who belatedly realizes he won't be seeing his family and daughter again. Damn. Back at Seoyan High School, we're taken to Class 1-3, where a lesson is underway. However, unlike regular classes, the teacher is talking about the recent monster attacks and what they mean for the country. He starts off by shedding light on the situation, explaining that the frequency of monster attacks has been increasing lately, with the count totaling 3 in that year alone. He also explains that the monsters, or rather Xenoterrans as they're called, are a legitimate threat to the people, with many dying each time they reveal themselves. It's no wonder everyone is terrified, with some even refusing to leave their homes for fear of an attack. Regardless, they are now a real part of reality, so it's best to talk about them and understand as much as possible. Know thy enemy and all that shit. Looking at the overly attentive faces of the students, faces they never show during normal lessons, teacher Changsik Park can't help but feel a twitch in his lips. If only they were this focused during regular classes. Nevertheless, he ignores the thought and continues. To kick things off, he explains the origin of the name Xenoterran. Xeno means different in origin, foreign or strange. Just like it's strange that your girl gets random late-night texts from Burger King telling her to come pick up a large package. Damn. Terran means monster, and can also mean inhabitants of Earth. Put together, the name best describes the species. Strange monsters. Name aside, a lot of information has been gathered since they first appeared a couple of years ago. For example, they are strong as hell. They have the physical ability to total a freight truck with a single blow and still have enough stamina to continue battling. Not only that, their speed is monstrous too, with some clocked at over 124 miles per hour. Thus, it's no exaggeration to call Xenoterrans walking calamities, with massacres occurring almost every time they appear. Since their first appearance 5 years ago, a total of 37 Xenoterran attacks have been recorded, resulting in 517 casualties, with many more injured. As for Korea, 6 attacks had occurred, not counting the previous days, which brings the total to 7. In that most recent attack, 14 people lost their lives, and the number would have been higher if not for Whitecap and his timely intervention. Of the 7 attacks in Korea, 5 were handled by Whitecap alone. The other 2 are mysterious, to say the least. The conditions surrounding their resolution are covered in dense fog, obstructing any meaningful attempt to investigate. The 5 handled by Whitecap, however, are straightforward: Mokpo, Samcheok, Taeyeon, Oryu, and Incheon Port. In all those cases, Whitecap crashed out, obliterated the Xenoterran, and saved lives. But because of that, and because of his existence alone, people can't help but draw a connection between him and the monsters. Who is he? Where did he come from? Is he a military cyborg? Or worse, is he somehow related to the appearance of the monsters themselves? There's plenty of speculation, but no concrete evidence. Whitecap and the Xenoterrans remain mysteries. Still, that hasn't stopped people from fearing Xenoterrans and worshipping superhumans, believing they are humanity's last hope, a beacon lighting the path into the future. Changing topics, Park talks more about the two attacks not stopped by Whitecap. Although many of the details are shrouded in mystery, a fair bit is known about each incident. For example, the first attack in Pohang, 2015. That was the very first Xenoterran attack ever recorded, making humanity aware of the existence of these strange creatures. It was gruesome. Dozens of corpses scattered across the site, and many more injured. Puzzlingly, among the bodies was the corpse of the attacking monster itself. It had been slain by a mysterious individual whose whereabouts are, as you might have guessed, still unknown to this day. The second attack is even more bizarre, not to mention the most tragic Korea has dealt with so far. A total of 75 people died that day, with over 100 severely wounded. It was a true nightmare, made worse by the fact that the monster escaped. To this day, it remains the only Xenoterran to reveal itself and live to tell the tale. Because of that, it was given a name, Heptahorn, modeled after the 7 horns protruding from its body. Eyewitness testimonies paint a grim picture. Just as countless people were being slaughtered, humans dropping like flies, a giant, long-haired man appeared and fought Heptahorn. But the man soon disappeared, followed by Heptahorn, who rose into the air before vanishing as well. This series of events stunned the public. Experts went crazy trying to crack the code, but none have been successful so far. The best theory they've come up with is that Heptahorn fought and killed the meddling giant, but suffered grievous injuries in the process, forcing it into hiding as it waits for another opportunity to strike. In fear of its return, several government organizations were created in preparation for Heptahorn, or any other Xenoterran, that might rear its head. First, the Xenoterran Alert Control Center, responsible for sending out public alerts in the event of an attack. Second, the Special Xenoterran Defense Forces, SXDF, tasked with bringing the fade to the monsters and engaging in combat, should freaks like Whitecap fail to appear and handle business. In general, Park explains that there's still a lot humanity doesn't know about Xenoterrans, or their superhuman counterparts. Why do they attack humans? Where are they from? Is the long-haired giant really dead? If so, where is his body? And where is Heptahorn hiding while it nurses its wounds? There are still too many mysteries, including Whitecap himself and his possible connection to the elusive duo of Heptahorn and the long-haired giant. As Park begins wrapping up, he suddenly realizes something infuriating. The students have long since dozed off. Some are even snoring loudly in the classroom. This immediately pisses him off. He slams his desk and yells at them to wake up, inwardly wondering why he even bothered teaching this in the first place. If he'd known his effort would be wasted like this, he would have chosen a more interesting topic, like how maidens are making generational wealth on OnlyPans, yet no one wants to make the next generation with them. Damn. Regardless, he orders them to wake up and take this seriously. They might think they can slack off because today's topic isn't part of the regular curriculum, but he makes it clear that learning and schoolwork aren't the most important forms of education. What they should truly be concerned about isn't mastering their A's and B's, but developing a profound concern for the future of mankind. Only then can there be hope. Only then can the defenders of tomorrow rise. He advises them not to take things at face value, but to learn how to see beyond what is shown. He goes on a full philosophical rant, but there's no way your boy is narrating all that. Just know he tells them not to obsess over books alone. Go out there, experience life, pull bitches, actually play the game called life. With that, he dismisses the class, telling them he'll see them next time. A while later, Teacher Park is shown driving down the streets, talking to his wife on the phone about their son. From the conversation, it's hinted that it's their son's memorial, and he's heading to meet his wife to honor the memory of their lost child. Struck with grief, He cries silently as memories of his son flash through his mind. From the hints dropped earlier, it's painfully obvious what likely took the boy's life. A monster attack. Damn. R.I.P. to the young homie.
Switching back to the Atlantic Ocean, we're taken to Captain Popeye and his crew's perilous situation. After stomping on the spinach-loving bastard's head, the Xenoterran doesn't immediately make a move. Instead, it eyes the man, seemingly asking, "What are you gonna do about it, big boy?" Of course, that's in a manly manner, not the sussy, sultry way you just pictured it, you pervert. Anyway, the man reacts in the only logical way. He says, "Fuck this," and rushes for the radio, clearly intending to call for backup. With a head start on the monster, he yanks the radio, presses the emergency button, and immediately starts ranting into the receiver, calling for anyone who can hear him. But before he can pass on his location and the name of his ship, the monster attacks from behind, slamming his head ruthlessly into the wall. The single blow leaves his face in ruin, his breathing coming out in ragged, heavy gasps. The monster, however, stays unfazed and lifts him up, its massive hand palming the poor bastard's head. It draws him closer, casting its eerie, bizarre eyes onto him. Sensing his impending doom, the man cries bitterly, asking to be spared. He doesn't want to die just yet. He still has a birthday party to attend. He still wants to see his little princess again, goddammit. Unfortunately, the world is cruel, and plot armor can't be wasted on the likes of him, so he inevitably meets his demise, choking, unwilling sobs echoing in the background. Accompanying those sobs is the frantic crackling of the radio. Help had finally reached out. Too bad it came a step too late. Elsewhere, on the massive Atlantic Ocean, the sound of laughter and enjoyment rings out. Waifus and baddies play on the deck, their anime cheeks and cakes giving nosebleeds for real. Besides them, there are also some sorry bastards. But who gives a damn about them? Let's focus on the mommies instead. They are the residents of the Opera, a cruise ship that sails the Atlantic, and currently none of them are aware of the monster that just invaded their paradise. Meanwhile, on the bridge, a more serious discussion is underway. The captain, who's been briefed about the recent Mayday signal, asks his staff what's going on and if they have any more information. The staff reply that they do. The ship radioing for help is a trawler, and judging by the coordinates they recorded before the connection was lost, they believe it should be approximately 10 miles from their location. They should be able to reach it within 25 minutes if they floor it. The captain instructs them to go ahead. They should be able to carry out a swift rescue if they hurry. The ship thus turns, making a beeline for the trawler. 25 minutes later, they arrive at the location, but judging by the mess on the ship, things aren't as simple as they seem. The corpses of both Popeye and his man lie sprawled on the ground, yet an identical man stays standing, beckoning for the cruise ship to approach. It's clear that this is the Xenoterran in disguise, using the poor fellow's skin to deceive the ship into drawing closer. What a cunning and insidious creature. Back in Seoyang High School, we're taken to the cafeteria at lunchtime. The students are lined up to receive their meals, and the same goes for this duo of sketchy bastards. The chunky one cries that he's hungry, to which the skinny one with the face of a 50-year-old uncle teases that he's always hungry. When has he ever admitted to being full? Chunky claps back, telling him not to mess with him. Plus, he means it this time. His mother refused to feed him, saying he's gained too much weight. Teen uncle tells him that isn't new news. He's been overweight for ages. It's a miracle his mother hadn't cut his fat ass off earlier. But that aside, is it just him? Or is their class full of ugly bitches? It's as if all the aesthetically challenged ones were rounded up and put in their class. Where's the justice in that? Chunky replies that he's one to talk. With the face of a conniving uncle, he's the last person who should comment on such things. Besides, he's sure the ladies feel the same way about him and his ugly ass. Fuming, sketchy uncle, Changriol Wu, claps at his friend Debong Lee, asking whose side he's on. Shouldn't he be supporting his homie right now? Lee replies that the maidens always come first. But another thing, he should be glad to be in their class because all the other classes are hell right now. Confused, Wu asks why that's the case. Is a thick mommy causing chaos or something? Lee replies that it isn't a thick mommy. That's just the narrator's pervy thoughts showing. Instead, it's the Kundo crew. He explains that the Kundo crew are spread across the upper classes, and theirs, class number 3, barely escaped that catastrophe. The only fiend they have to deal with is the cocky bastard behind them, but he isn't worth worrying about. As if reminded, Wu glares at Duke Gungi, a low-level member of the Kundo crew, ranting about how much he hates him. The fool is weak as hell, yet he parades around the school like he owns it. What an insufferable fellow. Lee tells him to calm down. Guy and his punchable face aren't worth the trouble. He'd better drop it before the wrong person overhears him. Wu says bet, but then someone else draws his attention. A beast of a man lining up behind Guy, Cheol Quan. With a taunt in his tone, Wu says that Quan could probably humble the Kundo crew. It's a wonder why he hasn't done so already. Lee replies that it's more like he doesn't want to, not that he can't. Quan tends to avoid fights unless he's provoked. Case in point, the bully at their junior high school who got bodied when he tried to mess with him. From then on, it was established to just leave the sleeping dragon alone, lest they get clapped. Wu sighs and walks forward, clearly intending to let the dragon be, though inwardly he can't help but hope for Quan to step up, to whoop the Kundo crew and show them what they're made of. A little while later, it's the duo's turn to be served. As expected of Porky Lee, he asks the server to fill him up, and not with that soup bullshit, but meat. All he wants to eat is meat. Pause. The lady replies that he can have all the meat he wants. She considers all of them her children, so giving him a little more meat, pause, to help him grow strong and sturdy isn't much of an issue to her. Moved, Lee asks if he can call her mom. On second thought, how about mommy? He moves to riz her but is kicked aside by Wu, telling him to get it together. Meanwhile, at a nearby table, our boy Kang is stuffing his face. One would find it hard to believe he's the same hero Whitecap who marinates monster cheeks for breakfast. Anyway, his little feast is interrupted when Cheol Quan, the sleeping dragon, pulls out the seat beside him and takes a seat. Ignoring Kang's incredulous gaze, Quan asks why he's eating alone. Does he not have any friends? Feeling ashamed, he confesses that he too has no friends. Mulling it over, Kang briefly thinks about Jury, but after some thought, he realizes that the strange fellow can't even be called a proper friend. He dejectedly confesses that he also lacks friends, making Quan sympathize with him. After a moment of mutual self-pity, Quan notices a feature on Kang that draws his attention, his knuckles, and how sturdy they look. He asks Kang about them and whether he plays any sports. Kang replies that he doesn't play sports, but he does teach himself taekwondo on occasion. The muscles are probably from his practice, or from when he patrols the streets looking for the Huz. Quan exclaims in surprise, replying that he didn't know that was a thing. Can someone truly teach themselves taekwondo? Regardless, he brushes the topic aside and addresses Kang directly. Since he also lacks friends and always eats alone, why don't they eat together from then on? No homo, of course. Kang says bet and moves to return to his food, but is interrupted by a loud thwack and a silhouette sent flying through the hall. The poor bastard crashes heavily, groaning to demonstrate how hurt he is. Behind him loom menacing figures, the same Kundo crew who've been infamous in the school lately. Tai-ik Choi, probably the one who yeeted him, grunts that weaklings like them shouldn't get in their way. He's already having anger issues as it is, and the last thing he needs is another bastard testing his patience. He yells for the rest of the students to make way, lest they be like that bastard and get sent flying. The students react differently to this threat. Some scurry away, while others, like sketchy Uncle Wu, click their tongues in irritation. What's all the fuss about? Can't they see he's trying to eat peacefully, goddammit? Quan and Kang, on the other hand, stay silent, though the obvious frowns on their faces show they aren't with that shit at all. Ignoring the varying reactions, Choe dares those who wish to come at him. He confesses that he's pent up with rage, and maybe a little violence is exactly what he needs to calm down. So for those daring enough, they should just step forward. He promises to let the first one up have it. Pause. Meanwhile, as the kids are playing bully, the scene shifts to the USA. In a private room in the great capital, the Secretary of Defense is freaking the hell out. He slams the table, asking how much longer they have to wait. More lives are being lost as they sit there waiting. The agent reassures him, telling him it won't be long. It's just a matter of time until their guests arrive. Speaking of the devil, the door opens with a creak, and in walks the hero baddie from before, St. Pearl, and her partner, Gellin Withrow. She asks the agent James to give them a briefing. James replies that time is of the essence, so he'll keep it short. He explains that a couple of hours ago, one of their cruise ships sailing in the Atlantic was taken over by a Xenoterran. The ship houses more than 3,000 passengers, kids, men, but most importantly waifus and baddies who shouldn't be harmed under any circumstances. He stresses that the hijacking has been ongoing for a while now, and it's no exaggeration to call it the greatest catastrophe the country has experienced thus far. Just think of all the helpless waifus, goddammit. Pearl and Withrow, upon hearing the news, agreed that it was indeed a catastrophe. Having so many civilians trapped in the middle of the sea with a Xenoterran was like rats caught in a floating trap, completely hopeless to escape. If aid isn't rendered fast enough, they very well might face the greatest catastrophe the country has known to date. James agrees and goes on to expound on the situation, but is cut off by St. Pearl. She tells him to save that shit for later. If civilians are indeed trapped in a floating can with a monster, then they better get their asses over there pronto. Whatever intel he has to share can be given en route. James says bet and readily complies. He tells the superhumans to lead the way. A helicopter is already on standby. Then, as if finally remembering his superior, he turns to the secretary, asking if he has anything else to add. The secretary says no and gives them his blessing. Whatever they need to do, they have his permission to do so. The trio nod and readily leave the room, the door slamming shut behind them. After they leave, the secretary finally heaves a sigh of relief. He'd been putting up a brave front, but goddamn, it was very uncomfortable to be in the superhuman's presence. It felt like he was suffocating, like a thick mommy was choking him with her thick thighs, which isn't that bad now that he thinks about it. Regardless, he's glad that's over now. Switching scenes, we're taken to an abandoned building in Korea. In the building, Dan Yang is giving Nanki an earful, cursing him out for exposing himself so carelessly. And worse still, exposing her as well. Because of his actions, the whole world is investigating their origins, and there's even talk of a bounty being placed on their heads. Nanki, however, laughs the entire thing off like it doesn't matter. A bounty on their heads? They haven't done anything to warrant that kind of treatment, right? Dan Yang claps back, telling him to take the situation seriously. It's his fault they got exposed, so can't he at least take the matter seriously? Nanki replies that it doesn't matter anymore. Remaining hidden or getting exposed won't change what they have to do next. Matter of fact, it'll be more convenient to act now that they're exposed. He explains to Dan Yang that the game has gotten way too interesting to keep watching from the sidelines. The world is about to face a huge whirlwind of chaos, and they're definitely going to be caught in the thick of it, or at the very least be on the side that offers them the best view. He tells Dan Yang not to sweat it. Getting exposed was part of his plan, and watching the chaos up close will surely be more fun. Meanwhile, back in the USA, Pearl, Withrow, and James finally make it to the chopper. The flying type, not the one you have hidden in your school bag, you psycho. They board the chopper, followed by James, reminding them to fasten their seatbelts. But after remembering that he's dealing with a bunch of superhuman freaks to whom seatbelts would be more of a constraint than an aid, he decisively drops the topic. Instead, he shuts his civilian ass up and minds his business, watching silently as the chopper takes off. A little while after takeoff, he finally gives the duo a proper rundown of the situation. He shares that the chopper they're on, the LC-100, is the fastest helicopter in the US fleet. With its speed, they should be able to reach their destination in about 2 hours. Then, with a somber tone, he explains the entire event from the beginning. At approximately 4 p.m. that afternoon, a naval base on the coast of Virginia received a distress signal. The nature of the call was identified as an attack by a Xenoterran on board a ship. Further investigation revealed that the ship was a cruise ship with approximately 3,000 people on board, 2,500 passengers and 500 crew, including the MILFs and waifus, of course. Since it was a Xenoterran attack, and the government took that shit seriously, they attempted to determine the level of damage on board, while concurrently reaching out to the superhumans for help. However, not only did they fail to determine the damage on board the ship, they also couldn't reach Pearl and Withrow, as they were in Scotland at the time. Thus, with no other choice, the government resorted to the best cards in their arsenal, deploying the SXDF, Special Xenoterran Defense Forces, and mobilizing an elite outfit of Navy SEALs. Together, the two forces chartered 5 submarines, using them to siege the target location. However, the result was a total disaster. The siege began at 8 p.m., and by 8:20, a measly 20 minutes later, the whole task force had been wiped out, communications completely cut off. James couldn't believe it either, but the result was as clear as day. The Xenoterran had wiped out an entire elite squad in under 20 minutes, thereby leading them to their current situation. Both Pearl and Withrow were taken aback by this, but James wasn't done with the bad news. He shared that there was one more matter of pressing concern. The Opera was currently operating on an automatic navigation system. Barring any surprises, it is set to dock at its original destination, Florida. Which means when the ship docks, their Xenoterran problem will shift to a mainland one, and who knows what damage the monster might cause. The government was surely unwilling to see that. Hence, a precaution was set. An F-40 fighter jet was trailing the ship, fully loaded with nuclear warheads cleared for launch. If the situation developed unfavorably and the matter wasn't resolved by the time the ship neared the dock, the jet was cleared to light it up. This news came as a surprise to the superhumans, who couldn't believe the government could do such a thing. Sacrificing 3,000 lives for the possibility of saving a couple more was ridiculous in their eyes. Still, James's serious tone and the obvious trembling in his hands told them he wasn't messing around. The government really meant that shit. James explained that it was the only option they had, even if it was the worst resort. They had no way of knowing how many people were still alive on the ship, if there were any at all, and how much damage the monster would cause once it hit the mainland. Thus, although cruel, this was the best they could do. Seeing him spiraling more and more out of control, Pearl calls out, telling him to stop shaking. Things hadn't gotten to that point yet. So long as she's around, Saint Motherfucking Pearl, the Xenoterran has to ask for her permission before it can cause more harm. James shouldn't worry, because the monster will definitely get clapped. Back in Seoyeon High School's cafeteria, Choik continues his rampage. He yells at the students, asking why they were trying him. Can't they see he's in a foul mood? Fine. Since they want smoke, smoke they shall get. He promises to fade the first 5 bastards who rub him the wrong way. Pause. He will definitely let them have it. Double pause. And that includes this bastard right here. He grabs the student by the hair, yanking on it until he cries out in pain. Choi asks why he got in his way, why he had to make his already horrible mood worse. Would he bear the consequences? The student tries to explain, but Choi tells him to shut up. He doesn't want to hear that shit. The only thing that will be talking is his hands. He moves to wreck the poor fellow, but is stopped by a loud shout calling him out. The shout comes from the waifu, telling him to let the student go. If it's smoke he wants, then she's down. He can bring that heat anytime. Incredulous, Choa flicks her a gaze, asking what the hell she just said. Did she really want to get involved in that shit? The waifu, in turn, doubles down, telling Choa he heard her correctly. She indeed wanted that smoke. If he was so keen on dishing out fades, then he should run her some. She was down for that shit. This declaration stuns everyone, who look at her like she was crazy. What fearlessness. What recklessness. Couldn't she see that Taik Chue was the real deal? Certified cheek clapper? She'd really stirred the hornet's nest this time. As expected, Choi said bet and matched her energy. First, he yeeted the poor boy to the side, throwing him away like he was a pile of trash. Then, with menacing steps, he closed in on Muhi, asking the brave baddie if someone had spiked her food or something. Was she under the baptism of Senior Escobar's secret sauce? Because how else could she explain such foolishness? Regardless, he let her know he didn't care what she was on. Whether it was Escobar's cocaina or Heisenberg's blue crystal, none of that mattered. What truly mattered was that he was a gangster, and his hands were rated E for everyone, meaning he beat girls too, and domestic violence was really his last name. Saying so, he swung at her, unleashing a bit of that gender equality no jutsu. Muhi flinched, but before the slap could send her flying, a figure intervened, firmly grabbing hold of Choe's hand. The figure was Quan, who told Choe to stop the bullshit. If he truly wanted Fade, then he should mess around with the boys, pause, and not trouble the waifus with his nonsense. For example, he was ready for smoke right now. So was Choe down or nah? Witnessing this, the whole cafeteria went crazy, with Cho's boys wondering what was going on. This was supposed to be a routine cheek clapping, so where the hell did that bastard Quan come from? The same was true for Chunky and Sketchy Uncle, who became incredibly invested in the fight, especially Sketchy Uncle, who shoved Chunky's head to the side, telling him to stop blocking his view. How was he supposed to watch the drama with his big head in the way? Meanwhile, the subject of the ruckus, Choe, had just about had enough of the bullshit. He whipped his leg back, landing a nasty kick to Quan's flank, sending him skidding into the distance. Regrettably, the blow wasn't as strong as Choe imagined, and Quan easily tanked that shit, his arms raised in defense. Fuming, Quan asked if that was all he'd got. He sure hit like a bitch for someone so large. Regardless, it was his turn now, and he hoped Choe wouldn't disappoint him. Under the spectators' fervent gazes, he rushed at Choe, unleashing a powerful kick to his head. Choe barely blocked it, but the blow left him reeling, his footing becoming a stumbling mess. He faltered and swayed for a while before barely regaining his balance. Still, Quan wasn't done just yet. He pressed the attack, blessing Choe with a right punch to the face. Then, under everyone's gazes, he paused the assault, choosing to see how Choe would react. To everyone's shock and the Kundo crew's dismissive smirks, Choe tanked that shit, his foot stomping hard on the ground. He snorted coldly, and like a badass third-rate villain, spat out his tooth, telling Quan he wasn't bad at all. For a bitch, that is. Even his little niece could hit harder than him. Still, he'd punched his handsome face, and for that, he had to pay. He hoped Quan wouldn't resort to begging for his life, because there was no way he'd spare him. His cheeks definitely had to get clapped. Pause. Hearing this, Quan instantly tensed up. This was originally just a normal fight. So how did his cheeks get implicated? But that aside, what type of steroids was this Choe bastard shooting? He'd basically struck him with everything he had, yet the bastard was still standing? What in the ox Viagra turned steroids was this? Before he could figure it out, a third voice cut in, telling the duo to cool their titties. That was enough fighting for one day. Besides, it was way too damn early for that bullshit, and the food was getting cold. Glancing at the new arrival, Mu Namgung, a boss of the Kundo crew, Taik Chue told him to mind his business. He'd promised to clap some cheeks, and he was anything if not a man of his word. Cheeks definitely had to be clapped that day. Pause. In response, Mu, nicknamed Baby Blue, told him to let it go. It was better to end that ruckus before the dean got there. The observers, particularly Chunky and Sketchy Uncle, watched on with undisguised tension, especially Sketchy Uncle, who confessed that he was getting a bad feeling from Mu Namgung. It almost felt like the Xenoterran-looking bastard had a whole graveyard in his closet. In response, Chunky told him to shut up before he got them into trouble. He explained that Mu Namgung is the most heavy-duty of the Kundo crew bosses. Although he's only ranked third in the gang's internal rankings, he is without a doubt the most ruthless and feared boss of the crew, more than capable of fucking up their day. Speaking of the fiend, he ushered Choe away, telling him to get going already. While doing so, he addressed Quan, saying he'd heard about him, a supposed big shot with hands for days. Still, that wouldn't save him from what came next. He'd made a big mistake that day, and Mu would make sure he regretted it dearly. He would help him understand just who it was he was dealing with. Tensed, Quan watched him go, refusing to comment on his obvious threat, but the look in his eyes showed that he took it very seriously. Meanwhile, Kang watched everything from the sidelines, seemingly not fazed in the slightest. He even had the leisure to polish his entire plate, burping loudly and scaring the shit out of everyone close by, who wondered if that was a horny goat bleeding or something. Back in the ocean, we're reunited with the trio of Pearl, James, and Withrow. After looking out the window, James informed the two heroes that they'd arrived. The target ship was finally in sight. To this, both Pearl and Withrow commented that it was too quiet. They'd expected things to be bad, but from the looks of it, it seemed things were way worse. Regardless, it was time to act, so Pearl told James to open the door. They would be leaving. Shocked, James asked if they were sure. Shouldn't they wait for the chopper to get lower? That way, their landing would be more secure. Pearl, however, told him to cut the chit-chat. Hadn't he watched Captain America? Well, she was about to Steve Rogers the shit out of this situation. Relenting, James handed out their comms. He informed them that with the earpieces, they'd be able to maintain contact, and he would also use them to track their locations. In case of anything essential, he'd reach out to them and inform them immediately. Nodding, Pearl grabbed hold of the door, preparing to jump off. But before doing so, she instructed James to contact the government and have them call off the airstrike. Now that she was there was no need to send in the missiles. James said bet and replied that he would get it done. Then, with a firm salute, he wished them luck in their upcoming hunt. The duo acknowledged his well wishes and jumped off, Steve Rogersing the shit out of the situation. They closed in on the ship, but unlike the 100-year-old Virgin, they didn't land in the water, but directly on the ship, announcing their arrival with a loud bang. Taking in their surroundings, the two heroes' faces changed. The entire scene was a mess. Corpses sprawled everywhere. Without a doubt, this was indeed the sickening work of a Xenoterran, and a strong one at that. Taking charge, Pearl instructed Withrow to move out. They had a monster to hunt. Withrow said bet and followed along, his face a mixture of rage and regret. Unbeknownst to them, the prey had already clocked their movements and was watching their every action intently. From the looks of it, who was the prey and who was the predator had yet to be determined. Back to James in the chopper. After sending the two heroes off, he immediately settled into his role as support, informing the duo about the layout of the cruise ship. He explained that the Opera was a massive ocean liner with a surprisingly complex structure that varied with each level. Thus, it would be incredibly difficult to locate the Xenoterran unless the fishy bastard found them first. Chiming in, Withrow replied that that wasn't a problem. All they had to do was cause a bit of a ruckus, and the bastard would surely show itself. Pearl agreed, but also proposed splitting up. Since the aim was to draw the monster out, they'd have more success if they covered more ground. Though hesitant, James eventually got on board, mapping out an efficient route for the duo to take. He explained that dividing themselves across the upper and lower decks was the best strategy to advance. One party would start on the upper deck, head into the engine room, and slowly make their way downwards from there, whereas the other would start at the storage room, move in reverse, and equally make their way upwards to the bridge. If they moved like that, they would cover more ground, and, more importantly, increase their chances of running into survivors, if there were any still alive. The only problem, however, was that the plan was risky as fuck. Moving alone meant they would have to fight the Xenoterran solo if they ran into it, as opposed to tag-teaming the shit out of it by moving together. This risk could not be underestimated. Pearl, however, wasn't fazed in the slightest. She told James not to worry about it. Plus, they truly had no other choice. If they hoped to rescue survivors, then speed was their best ally, meaning they had to split up. Withrow supported the idea, saying it was their best bet for now. Whoever ran into the Xenoterran could just consider their luck shitty and try to hold on for as long as they could. Still, it was yet to be determined who'd truly be in danger if they ran into the Xenoterran. Maybe he and Pearl had what it took to clap mega cheeks, and the monster would just be sending itself to the afterlife by running into them. Pearl said bet and turned to leave. Since everything had been discussed, there was no point lingering further. Plus, what Withrow had just said had struck a chord in her. Maybe she really was the ultimate cheek clapper, and running into the Xenoterran was her big break. Regardless, it was time to leave. She still had an appointment with some monster cheeks after all. Jumping off the deck, she Steve Rogers the shit out of the fall before stabbing her hand into the hull. With that as leverage, she slowed her descent, eventually stopping just shy of the ocean surface. Still, that was more than sufficient, as she'd ended up exactly where she wanted to be, the hull outside the storage room. Wasting no time, she kicked off the boat, gathering momentum before swinging back in with a devastating attack, effortlessly tearing her way into the storage room. Once inside, Pearl, the offshoot Captain Marvel with a severe steroid addiction, took in her surroundings, finally confirming that she'd made it to her destination. The storage room, as evidenced by the shit ton of boxes in her way. Contacting James, she reported the same, asking him to confirm her exact location. James replied that she was on the 4th basement level, exactly where they needed her to be. But that aside, what could she see around her? And were there any survivors in her location? Pearl replied that she couldn't see anyone, just a pile of boxes and a bad bitch standing in the room. The baddie was obviously her, which is to say there was no one else around, not even corpses. James said bet before switching to Withrow, asking the homie how his search was going. From his tracking, he could tell Withrow had made it quite deep inside. Pause. So, did he find anything of note? Withrow replied that the only thing he'd found was corpses, and a hell of a lot of them at that. From the moment he entered that cursed ship, the only thing he'd laid his eyes on was destruction and dead bodies. Not exactly the best views for sightseeing. Regardless, he would keep searching, so James should wait for updates, should he have some. As the two conversed, the comms started bugging, glitching and buzzing in their ears, making contact incredibly difficult. This alarmed James, who looked out the window, wondering if the incoming storm had anything to do with it. But after some consideration, he deduced that the likely cause was their location, the Bermuda Triangle. Based on the ship's route, it was scheduled to pass through the triangle, but James hadn't thought they'd be so unlucky as to time their operation at that exact moment. Still, the job had to be done, so he signaled for the duo to continue, even though moving solo without comms was incredibly dangerous. Back to Withrow on the ship. After moving around for a while, he finally ran into his first survivor, though the dude was clearly out of it. He increasingly spouted a bunch of nonsense, talking about a monster and how they'd been deceived. Curious, Withrow moved closer to the man, eager to know what he was talking about. But after listening for a while, the man's words seemed even more nonsensical, leaving him quite puzzled. He kept talking about a devil and how it had fooled all of them. Worse still, his wife had been the devil all along, and she still let him hit. What kind of fucked up shit was that? Confused, Withrow wondered if the man was delirious from fright. Was he witnessing how fear could destroy a man? He wanted to report back to James, but the comms were still bugging, making the relay impossible. Meanwhile, James wasn't having a picnic either. With the comms down, he was essentially useless, because the one thing he could do to help the supers was officially off the table. Sure, he could still track their locations, but without comms to report any findings, what good would knowing their location be? As for Pearl, she also picked up on the oddity with the comms, but her side was relatively calm, so she didn't care too much. She continued searching the storeroom, only stopping when someone called her name from behind. Turning, she was surprised to find that it was a little girl, the first survivor she'd run into thus far. The girl, in turn, became ecstatic upon recognizing her, asking Mrs. Pearl if she'd come to rescue them. Pearl replied that she had, but there was one thing she needed to get right. She wasn't Mrs. Pearl, just Pearl. She was still a prime maiden, after all. Meanwhile, on Withrow's side, things finally took an interesting turn. After searching through the ship and ignoring the man who might or might not have cracked a devil, evidence still pending, he finally arrived before a bloody door. Pushing it open, he found himself in the banquet hall, and it was a mess. The whole place reeked of blood, and an unsettling feeling covered the room. Just as he was about to back out and say fuck that to the typical horror movie stereotypes, he noticed something that caught his attention. Pearl, or what seemed like Pearl, standing in the middle of the room, double-cheeked up like a duck on Sunday dinner. Withrow was taken aback by this and asked how she'd gotten there, but more importantly, where she'd gotten all that ass. In response, Pearl turned to face him, her expression as cold as ice. When she finally opened her mouth to talk, what came out wasn't the sultry voice of the superhuman baddie, but the bestial growls of a monster. That wasn't Pearl at all, but the Xenoterran cosplaying as her, hence the massive difference in their cheeks. Nevertheless, Withrow went on high alert. Too bad it was too late. Before he could react, the monster suddenly lunged at him, chomping down with a sickening crunch. It drew blood, but Withrow reacted fast, jumping back to avoid more damage. When he distanced himself from the monster, the full extent of the injury became apparent, and it was bad. His right arm had been bitten clean off, blood sputtering like a fountain. Still, he wasn't out of the woods just yet. The monster rushed in for seconds, opening its massive maw to swallow him whole. Speaking of swallow, it's confirmed. That poor bastard did crack a devil. Damn.